All right, we're live. We're happening. Well done with that technology. I know it's kind of a pain in the rear end sometimes when we have to link over to this and set something new up, but we're happening. And welcome to the decision table, Laurie.
Thank you.
So good to have you here. These conversations that I'm having every day this month is to really, I don't know, I had a lot of people who said to me at the end of last year, I can't wait for the year to finish. I can't wait for it to finish. And it kind of got to me because I was like, okay, so what are you going to do different
to
make the new year different, right? And so then, of course, not only do I ask that question to, everyone else, I go, what am I going to do different? And so I thought one of the things I can do different is have a different conversation with an awesome human every single day.
Love that.
And at the moment, I'm writing this white paper on, and you'll love this, on what I believe is the need for a new approach to leadership.
Yes.
And so really using that lens as we talk to how can that look? What does that look like? And you and I just spoke before and you began a conversation. I said, oh, let's bring that into the decision table because I thought that was really good. And it was around change, knowing that we do need a change, right? And it's so different last year. And even what we were looking at, how it looks for us personally together as well, as what we are looking at doing. But then also the world is kind of having to recalibrate to what that looks like for the world as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I reckon that's a good spot for us to start on today.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, look, last year was difficult for everyone. Nothing went as according to plan. COVID-19 took us all by huge surprise. Many businesses were closed, schools were closed. Everyone was forced to be home. That was a huge, huge change. And oftentimes change is something that we choose, and other times change is something that we don't choose. And I think we found our entire world in a position where we were not choosing this change. But, it's so much about how you decide you're going to deal with that change. And, you can go into it with a negative attitude and be angry that you're stuck at home and be angry that you can't go to the office, or you can choose, like we have done, to, see the good in that change. It has really, from a professional standpoint, caused me to rethink the way that I do things in my business.
Yeah.
I work in government affairs and lobbying. So much of that is done, almost all of that is done in person. It's interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
Being in the room when decisions are being made, and when there's no room to be in, how do you deal with that? How do you shift and how do you adjust to that change? We talk about, what does leadership look like now? I think that it's really causing so many people, myself included, to figure that out.
Yeah.
Is leadership, I'm finding some of the elected officials that I'm dealing with, I'm finding leadership in them being creative and finding ways to make themselves available to us, making themselves available virtually for conversations and meetings, taking something that used to be a 3-minute conversation in a hallway at the State House turns into a 30-minute or a 45-minute Zoom conversation.
Wow.
That's wonderful. I love that. I get that. So, not all of this change is bad. It's just different. And I have a sincere appreciation for these leaders who are choosing to really be very deliberate in the way that they are making themselves available. Very deliberate in the way they're making themselves available. It's been good.
Yeah. So part of that new change is how, as a leader, can we be more available? But we have to be careful too, because I think when there's that other side of it, when we're more available, I mean, I don't know how they're feeling, but I think burnout was really real last year.
Oh, yeah.
You know, being more available means those 3 minutes turn into 30 minutes.
That's hard to balance.
Right. So how do we be more available yet make sure and ensure that we can do this sustainability, you know, keep it going in the long term and be sustainable with it?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't going to last forever, right? So I think that
isn't it? It feels like it is.
It sure feels like it is, but we're going into a really busy time for our legislative delegation, a time when I would be spending the majority of my days in the State House and meetings and committee meetings and session meetings and what will that look like this year? I don't know. And so I'm trying to also coach my clients to understand that we also all have to be incredibly prepared to communicate very, very clearly, because we have to do things differently right now. And everyone's having to do things differently right now.
Yeah.
So how do you rise above the noise? How do you make sure your message is heard?
So how are you doing that?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've been doing a lot of virtual briefings for people, which is a great opportunity to get my clients, the subject matter experts, in front of legislators for a longer period of time. Certainly we do that and would take them with us to meetings, but to have this opportunity to really dive a little deeper is fantastic. And I think that that's a real benefit. And folks who maybe weren't able to join the briefing, being able to share that information as a follow-up so that they're getting it. I think that's a really fantastic way of doing things. Building relationships is so much of what I do in my business. And so really just trying to find a balance of people who are comfortable meeting in person, people who would rather do so virtually, going to them in their districts versus, just waiting to meet them in other places. It's really just about being flexible and being able to pivot and going to where people are comfortable and understanding that everyone's in a different place. Everyone has a different feeling about this. So some people are comfortable meeting in person. Other people are not at all comfortable meeting in person. So how do you need to be respectful of everyone and where they're at and figure out how you're going to get done what you need to get done in a way that is comfortable for everyone and safe.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's a few things that you're saying there around respect and connection. These have come up on a few conversations on here on the decision table. And with that, I find it interesting because if we look at the challenges across the world right now, a lot of that is bringing division. It's not bringing connection. It's definitely not bringing respect. So in a lot of ways, the gap is actually widening in many respects, to do with this.
Agreed.
How do we narrow that? And you talk about things like relationships are so important. In other words, relationships are extremely important. And we need to have people at the table that are not maybe looking like us, sounding like us, and be okay with that, and to work from that. And yet, in a lot of ways, that's becoming harder and harder.
It is. I hate that we're in this place, especially here in the U.S. with what has transpired over the last few weeks with the forming of the Capitol and unacceptance of the election. And of course, we had the inauguration yesterday. It saddens me to see this growing division between I don't even have, people to point to. I think it's a really sad time, I think, for our country. I think it's confusing for a lot of people. I know a lot of people that I have conversations with. It's you almost get in a position where you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do. You want to be part of the solution, but you don't want to create problems in doing so. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? So then you don't say anything, which is also not the right thing. So, it's really difficult, where it's such a volatile point in our country right now, that I just pray that we can get to a place where we can have meaningful, non-judgmental conversations with each other. Because I know so many people who want to be part of the solution, but I think that they don't know what their role will be, and they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm having these conversations, because it is this kind of conversation that we've got to start having. And there are, like you said, there are others that want to have this. So how do we do that in a bigger way? How can we get some of these conversations happening more? Because I think it does start with us having a different conversation and having different people at the table. And then it's got to be no judgment. And that's what I love about the decision table. I always say to any awesome human that comes and be a part of the decision table, there's no judgment at this table. There's no right or wrong to what we're saying here. I'm curious. I think we have to have a conversation that's curious, like with lots of curiosity, where we are not saying that we know it all, not saying that even we know what questions to ask necessarily right at this moment, because like you've already addressed, that's forever changing. And so we have to evolve as it evolves, right? This world. And that's the thing, we want to evolve forward, not backwards. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've been going backwards, honestly. I mean,
that gap is widening rather than narrowing right now.
It is.
In many cases.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm always someone who wants to understand the root cause for things, so that we know where.
If you were speculating, I think that the division, there's conversation that we could have around, why is division happening? I think because people are wanting to have a voice, and maybe they're a voice of a tribe and when I mean tribe, it might be a community of people. It might be that have wanted to have a voice before, but have never had a voice. And so we're almost all screaming all these different voices. And even within what I've found within those communities, often that those voices are disagreeing within the community, let alone then that community coming out as a voice. So there's even division within, that the people that are trying to have a voice. Like I've got, this beautiful friend who is hard of, she's deaf. And so it's like, well, she wants to have a voice, but it's so noisy, and she's got to have a voice in a very noisy world where she's trying to go, hey, I want to be a part of this conversation, but you're not even putting words on screens right now, and everything is on screens.
Yeah, everything's on screens. Yeah.
So there's people that miss out, and so their voice is getting even less heard.
Absolutely.
Because they're not being included into being even at the table to be a part of the conversation that maybe we don't even know or are aware of that's even an issue. And I think that's bringing more division too. What about you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you and I talk so much about the need for diverse voices around the table, but truly, because I think there are some people who will say they want diverse voices around the table, but they really don't. They really only want the certain sector of what they believe to be diverse voices around the table. I experience that a lot when people say, they want racial diversity, they want gender diversity, they want,
yes.
all of the kind of top of mind diversity issues, but they don't necessarily want political diversity. They don't necessarily want disability and ability in their diversity. They don't necessarily want age in their diversity. So,
yes.
I think that if we want to talk about everyone having a voice at the table, we need to really be inclusive in ensuring that everyone has a voice at the table, because if you're not, then you really don't want all those voices there. And that's
okay. In a perfect world, we've got all those voices at the table.
Mm-hmm.
The next piece is, and I think this is interesting too, is, okay, we've got this awareness because we're having a different conversation. How do we own a piece of that? Like, what do we do with that?
That's a tricky question. I mean,
isn't it? Because like, what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Now that we've got a conversation, now that we're bringing that together, how do we own that as a collective? Because I think this is the other side of it. I think we have to get past all these individual leaders that are just these isolated islands trying to do their own, and it's not bad. Like maybe they are bringing some good change to a community of their own, sphere of influence. But the collective is going to be the place of collaborative change. Is only going to be within the collective. Like, I really believe that. And we've got to, again, come from where it's been divided and all these little islands to joining together and going, that's not saying, by the way, one government, one everything. I'm not for a disclaimer on this decision table, in case someone decided to interpret Kira Marie is all for that. I'm not. But what I am for is this ecosystem where it is all about collaboration. And I don't know that there's great examples of this.
There isn't.
And I don't know that we even know how to begin to do this sometimes, and I think that's an issue.
It is an issue. And I think that even when you think that you are there in this beautiful ecosystem of collaboration, there will always be improvement that can be made. And, I think it's finding those individuals who have the ability to have these conversations with this collaborative group in respectful ways, so that good comes from it. Because, it can be very dangerous sometimes to get so many different minds around a table. And, sometimes more harm can come from things than good, unfortunately. So I think it's hard. It's hard to find those people who have a genuine desire for collaboration, because
here's the thing, it's hard, but it's not impossible, because you and I are two examples of that.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? Agreed. So it's not impossible. Yes, it's hard. It's not impossible.
Agreed.
So how do we bring more respect to the table?
Yeah.
How do we, as a new approach to leadership, how as leaders can we be more respectful of other leaders?
Yeah. I think that at least here in the US, and what we have seen in the last 2 months, 3 months, has been very disappointing from many, many, many different people.
Of course.
Not respecting a process, not respecting an outcome, not respecting each other, not respecting other points of view. It's just so divisive, so divisive. And, I am hopeful that we have opportunity to do better. It's hard when, I always say this because, we've got a pretty clear political party system here in the United States, but it's the extremists on both sides that make things bad for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And until people can accept that the extremists are not the norm, it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be really difficult. It's like this small group of people on both sides that scream the loudest and, create violence and engage in unlawful activity and all of those things on both sides that, and I'm not saying that in some instances, that they shouldn't be angry, that they shouldn't be screaming. I'm not saying that, but I think it's the extremism that gets us in these positions.
It's interesting. You say the system, trusting and respecting the system and the processes and things like that. And I think of leadership and I go, are we trusting an old system that's not actually working with us forever, adapting and changing environments? Is it moving with it enough? I question that now. Like when you bring that up, I go, well, maybe part of the reason there's noise is there was very much you think about it, right? We're talking a lot around having, different distinctions at the table. Well, if we just use a gender conversation, right? And we do often in this one, we know who is at that table in general or has been, and the systems that were created that actually meant that it was very difficult for more females to be at that table.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Prime example. And so there's reason to sometimes why there's uproar in that way, right?
Absolutely.
And I go, well, there's so much that's in concrete almost that is really immovable because we've done it so long this way. Yet so many of us are saying, hey, we've got to change, we've got to evolve, we've got to. So how do we do that? Like, well,
no, I agree with you completely. When I speak about trusting the systems, it's trusting our electoral systems. It's trusting, things like that have tons of checks and balances. That to say everything's perfect, no, of course not. But when it comes to those types of systems, I think you have to have some trust there. Absolutely, do I think other systems need to be challenged? Of course. Other mindsets need to be challenged? Of course. I mean, just like, businesses are always evolving and recasting and reworking their visions, I think more organizations and people need to do that too. We need to be evolving with what's going on around us. We need to be evolving with, what are we lacking? Where are the gaps? Why is this huge gap happening? How can we be a part of the solution? It's really interesting to me to see how it's just so much there's so much division, more than I have seen in my lifetime. Certainly, I think before my lifetime there was more, but I just don't understand, I guess, why the pendulum is swinging this direction. And that's what's frustrating.
And is this because maybe we're so used to being conditioned by systems and processes and, let's go there. Like, the whole vaccine thing, whether you choose to have a vaccine or not, like that's an individual choice. Yet in many cases, it's not becoming an individual choice. It's a forced choice.
Yeah.
And, I often wonder here in Australia that we've managed to keep those numbers right down because we've done a lot of isolating. And we can do that because we're kind of an isolated country that it's actually just those that are coming from outside that are tending to bring it into our country. Now, here's the thing. I've had it. And it's a hideous thing. And I don't want anyone to have it. I've got I've got Ethan in my house who, is, a vulnerable human being. And I never want him to experience it. But in the same way, so a vaccine in his world would be a massive vulnerability because he reacts, and myself included, if I put strange things in my body, and yet if I want to travel or if I want to do some of these other, and who knows what other restrictions they put on it, that it just becomes compulsory. Where is our choice as a human coming out of that? Like, and how easily are we just accepting, well, this is our new norm? And I think those are the questions that I'm really bringing up right now, because I even have done that with people here in Australia. I'm like, have you really truly questioned which vaccines are bringing in, what that's to do long term? None of us know what that means. Interesting. I was talking to Zimbabwe, Juliet in Zimbabwe. And she was on the decision table, and we were talking about, like I have once a month, I do an incubator with her so that, helping her work on her stuff. And, it came up in that conversation how Zimbabwe have used and are using during this time a deworming medication, right? That is, it was created, I think, something like 70 plus years ago for animals and deworming animals. Here's the thing. I know Zimbabwe and Brazil have used this because they don't have access to a lot of the things that we have. They've had a lot of people dying. They've had a lot of issues. It's huge there, right? And they've started and Brazil did the same thing. They decided to do it, and that curve began to drop massively because of it. But here's the thing. It's before it becomes an issue in you. Once it starts multiplying, it's got no control, and this does not. But this is a thing that has been in place for 70 plus years, not a new vaccine, not something that someone's creating, that we have no idea what the long-term effects are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting how culturally our countries have dealt with this in different ways. And, what's interesting here in the US is, us living in a democracy and having such a sense of freedom. There's huge division on people who are opposed to mask requirements, who are opposed to curfews. We have a curfew here. We can't be out past 10 o'clock. We can't be in public without having a mask on. Many businesses have, unfortunately.
Is this state or this is nationwide?
This is state. State. But I will be interested to see with the new administration in the White House if some of this becomes federal. You've got this political divide on something that I wouldn't have anticipated being a political issue when it first happened. People saying, you can't do this, you can't require me, you can't take away my freedom. So it's interesting to see the division that's been created from that. Certainly the vaccine issue is a huge divide. But vaccines in general have been a huge divide, even before this.
But we had a choice whether we put it in place or we didn't, right?
We did.
Whereas that's being taken away in so many of our cases now.
We aren't.
People have lost roles in companies because it became compulsory that you had to have.
Well, yeah, I mean, businesses do have the right here to require that you be vaccinated, and you got to think about some of these big corporations. They've got mass numbers of employees that they're going to be putting in buildings together. So, I also am a huge proponent of an individual business's right to enforce those sorts of things, because I think that you have a choice.
And I absolutely agree on that, right? We do have a choice, but we don't have a choice, because if you put that on as a company and I'm really allergic to things,
Well, I
do
think
I have a choice or do I not have a choice? That's the
have to
question,
have some
right?
medical exceptions. I mean, you know,
But do we? And that's
yeah.
that's the thing,
Oh, I
right?
think so. I think so. But then the problem becomes when people take advantage of that. Someone who doesn't
Yes.
have a
Yes.
true medical issue, or someone in their home with a true medical issue, and just aren't personally comfortable with things, and say, you know, I'm not comfortable coming to work because of X, or I'm not going to get the vaccine because I have a medical issue, when in fact they don't have a medical issue. So I think that our business community is dealing with that now, as you know, people are finding ways to
Interesting.
work around things. They're finding ways to work around things.
And a lot of this comes, and I think the root to this is, and I love the fact that we're having this conversation, is that it comes around awareness, right? Until we have these conversations. And I mean, I think that's a great point. Yes, I totally agree with you that a company needs to have that right to protect their workers, right? And for them, that is the lens in which they say, hey, if we make it compulsory, then we know that we're protecting our workers. But I think what is, and this goes back to some of the other conversations that we've had on here around things like the division, because even within that community, we're not understanding, or we're not having, or the fact that those that maybe need to have a voice aren't having a voice. And then the exceptions, when we have a voice, how do we make those exceptions? If we make it for you, who else gets that or doesn't, or like, and this is the tough thing, right? And so
it's a challenge to leadership. It's a challenge to leadership, right? So how do we
do that better? How do we do that more effectively?
Yeah.
In a new approach?
I think that there's a lot of learning. I think there's a lot of working through experience. I think, you know, we don't have best practices for anything like this. This is new territory for so many. And I think that so many leaders are well-intentioned, but still, you know, either a policy isn't tight enough and someone is finding a workaround, or it's not tight enough and, you know, therefore becomes ineffective. You know, you have to allow for exceptions for obviously medical issues and things of that nature. But, you know, is it, you know, you or someone in your household is autoimmune compromised, therefore that's your exception? Or is it, you know, I want to see my grandma in 3 weeks for a holiday, you know, and these are things that people are saying. So you have to be very clear in, you know, your policies and what does that look like? And there's a huge liability issue here too, right? Like, what happens if someone comes in, you know, your policies are loose, someone gets sick, you know, I was very, very sick. It was awful. I wouldn't have wanted to share that with anyone. You know, and so how do you protect yourself and your company at the same time? There's a huge liability issue there too. It's just very complicated. There's so much unknown and so much learning through experience right now that I don't know if there are right answers. I think that in a few years we'll have some clarity around that. But I think it's a real challenge to leadership right now. There's a real challenge. I mean, look, we've got this huge workforce that for almost a year now, many of whom have been working from home because they have had to work from home. I mean, these large corporations that have hundreds and thousands of people, they're working from home. They can't bring them in. Well, guess what? People like that. And so what does that mean, you know, when you want to bring them back and your employees have different expectations and different wants, and you know, how are you shifting and changing your company policies and your leadership in response to all of that? And, you know, there's just it's a very interesting time to be a leader in our world right now.
Yeah. It is an interesting time, and you addressed it right at the beginning, and you said around the whole, yes, there's that truth in the fact that there's almost a fear if we speak up, because we might say the wrong thing, we might, and show disrespect in places, we might create an opportunity where it really opens up to us to vulnerable situations. And I think, and like you're just saying there now, it's a really tough time. What is interesting around that is it is a tough time, and all of us, if we come back to humanity and we say humans are stakeholders at the decision table, then reality is we are all humans to start with, and we go through hard times. This is a hard time that we know unless it destroys the whole world, that we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
We are going to get through it.
Yeah.
What would you give, or what are some strategies to do it, as in building resilience during difficult times? Because I think it's okay. So we realize that this is kind of like, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of in this. And I think this is where part of this new approach to leadership is, us as leaders, is not avoiding the fact that there's challenges, that we're not avoiding the fact that there's uncomfortable conversations. But I also know we're still human. And if we are consumed with that or busy with that 24/7, no one survives that. We just don't. We don't. But we have to build a resilience in us as leaders. And I think this is part of that new approach, is how do we build and create mental toughness that at times maybe we didn't access that capacity, but we have to now.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I talk about this a lot, that I think that if I look just within my own family and the resilience that I have seen develop within my children, when you have an immense amount of change and you have so much that is out of your control, you build up this resilience that you don't even, I think, realize you're building. Our family had a very, very tough year last year.
Yeah,
not completely outside of COVID, which is in itself very tough. My children lost 2 grandparents within 5 months. One very short cancer journey, 3 months. The other complications from heart surgery, and I will say a COVID related death, because even though she didn't have COVID, she was isolated from us. So I consider it a contribution to her, to what happened to her. So, my children dealt with that, and at the same time dealt with COVID, dealt with being ripped out of school, being forced at home, being isolated from their friends, all of their extracurricular activities taken away, all this massive sense of loss that, I believe, while it really is difficult while you're going through it, builds into your psyche this intense sense of resiliency, whether you like it or not. So, something that I would have thought would have been devastating or would break someone is handled much differently now, because they've been put in this position. And I think humanity has dealt with this to some degree. These things that are beyond your control that happened in your life build mental toughness. They build you up so that as difficult things are thrown your way in the future, you know how to deal with it. I think of the holidays here, which is typically a time for, family gatherings and seeing people and doing fun things. And, we had none of that this year. We had none of it. We're not able to get together over Thanksgiving because of COVID. We were at home. We were not able to get together with anyone because at Christmas rather, because of COVID. All of these extra things we normally would be doing, couldn't do it because of COVID. Couldn't go anywhere or do anything for New Year's because of COVID. We had a trip planned, just our family to just take a break, get away from it all. Couldn't go because of COVID. So, I think we're at the point now where, having that loss and disappointment as children, I hate that they're going through this. I wouldn't wish it upon them, but I think they will be better served for it. I think that they will be productive adults. Because of the toughness that they're building now. I think they will not have a sense of entitlement and expectation as they grow into professionals in part because of this situation. So, I don't wish it upon anyone, but I think that the result will be beneficial.
Yeah. I love that. And how are you going to be more resilient?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I could get more resilient than I am right now.
Let's take a back step and go, what has helped you to get through?
Yeah, I think that I've always been pretty resilient, to be honest with you. But I think that my level of expectation has been put in check.
That's a good one.
I try, and I'm trying to let this bleed over into other parts of my life. Setting very realistic expectations for myself, for my company, for my clients. I think that this year has really given everyone a sense of what is really important.
So good.
Put a value of importance on things that don't really mean anything. And I think that I am seeing that everywhere in my community, with my clients, with the elected officials that I'm working with. At the end of the day, is this thing important?
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So that's a big takeaway I've had from this past year, for sure.
So important. I think, we've had to learn to grieve in different ways. When we've lost a loved one. It was definitely a challenge in that way, but it built this realization that connection is so important.
Yes.
And and for me, that was really hard because I don't get to hang with people like yourself.
I hate it.
To get that girl time, to get that time where we know refuels us, right?
Yeah.
And that was really difficult because in my local area, I wasn't even in Sydney very much. And so I didn't have those connections. My connections were overseas. And that was the hardest thing. And I've had to learn to go, this is not forever. But for this season, how will I step that up? What does that need to look like for me? And how do I do that in a way that I still can stay connected? I mean, there are a couple of people, and one of them, Danielle, she goes, I don't do Zoom, I don't do phone, I don't do, and I'm like, I only do face to face. And I go, you're in Austin, Texas, and I can't meet with you. So how do we connect?
Let's figure this out.
Right. And so I think all of us are having to do these little shifts that are really different and figuring out what that looks like for each one of us.
Yeah.
And that's how we build. We just keep building on that, looking at, and I think where you mentioned around expectations, I think there was this point in life where we could set very much before sort of the pandemic hit the world, where we could set those expectations at a much bigger capacity and a much higher level of moving that on. And now we've had to bring that back and go, hey, what is that small shift that we can do, and how do we do that well?
Yeah.
If people want to, connect with you and want to learn more about what you do, how do they do that best?
Yeah. So my company website is lmkadvocacy.com. So you can check out information there. My contact information is there as well. Of course, I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can pretty much find me. Lots of different places. So happy to connect, and always love making connections with like-minded people, and even if they aren't like-minded people who are willing to have good conversation with one another.
Yeah, I love that. And I always ask this on the decision table, and this question, which is, we know that awareness is really, really important, but it's also ownership, to bring in actual change that's going to be sustainable going forward. What is it you're taking from our conversation today? Because I know you've got to pop off, and so I just want to ask you this question, and then I will tie up the decision table, and I will bless and release you to go and do your call.
Thank you. Yes, I apologize. I've got a call I need to jump on, but I really think that just being very conscious and aware of the challenges that leaders of all types are having in this season, like you said, that we're in. It's not easy for anyone who is a leader in a community, in a company, in an organization, in a government to have to pivot as much as we have over the past 10, 11, 12 months. So I think that I am just going to be very cognizant of that, and be as aware as I can be when I am talking with people, when I am working with people. Just that grace that you can provide to yourself, and that you can provide to other people, and understanding that we're all dealing with really challenging times right now, and to allow ourselves the opportunity to just be graceful, just understand that, we're going to get through this together. We're going to stumble along the way. We're going to learn from those times when we stumble, but we're going to get better as a result of it. We're going to build that resiliency. We're going to build that mental toughness. And once we do get to the other side, and we will get to the other side, that we'll all be better for it.
Love that. All right. I know you've got to go. Thank you so much for being amazing on here.
Much love.
Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you, my friend.
Yes. I have to pop off. So
you do. Ciao. Go for it. See ya. Oh, wow. This has been an amazing conversation with Laurie. It's always a pleasure. She's a great colleague, a great girlfriend of mine, an amazing person in my world. And I wanted to share with you a little conversation that we have, and just how we have a conversation with each other. If you want to know more about what we're doing, because actually one of the little projects that we're working behind the scenes is we are putting a podcast together. And so it's called the Leaders Movement Podcast. And the difficulty with Laurie is she's a busy, busy woman. So we had the privilege of having her here. And that's why I brought the decision table, by the way, forward as well. And what's great about that is that it's hard to get a hold of her, so we're putting these podcasts together when we can and when we get these moments, and that will be released as soon as we've got enough in the pot. If there's some things that you have loved around today's conversation, I would love for you to share this, because this is how we spread the awareness out there. And if there's something that has been brought up into this conversation today, I'd love to hear what that is. I'd love to hear your insights from our conversation today. What has it begun to open up? Maybe more questions. Maybe you've got some questions for me, Laurie, or us as a collective. Or you've got some, questions that you'd love answered on the decision table. If you're listening, whether now or, with the replay, then make sure that you put those questions in the comments, and we will follow that. I will follow those up. I'll be looking out for them. And if you know someone who would be great to have on the decision table, then I want you to reach out, and maybe that someone is you. You know, these are great leaders in their own sphere of influence, but they're really everyday people just like you and I. And I think that that's where we've got to bring that, you know, in the past, there's been a lot of hierarchy in leadership. And, you know, I often get asked, how do you get to be at some of the tables that you get to be at? And I go, I don't know. I kind of don't even see it like that. I just go, well, I've been invited to this conversation and I just don't say no when it comes to it. And so that because of that, I found myself at amazing tables with, you know, former presidents of nations and all sorts of amazing people. But those amazing people are just humans like you and like I. And I think that we have got to stop thinking that a leader has to be this person and looking like this person, and they can only talk to a certain person, because the only way we're going to create awareness of what is really needed and decisions that really truly need to be made at a decision table is by us having the willingness to see humanity as stakeholders at the decision table. And when I say humanity as stakeholders, it means for me, where first we add value to the fact that you're a human who is at the table. Then you bring your distinctions, all those beautiful flavors that make up you, the uniqueness to you. And we're going to, you know, use that as a lens on one of the decision table series coming up. And the other one is because I want to write a white paper around that particular topic. And the other topic that I talk about a lot, and I know I want to use as a white paper as well, and that is around you having the capacity, because, you know, we've talked about resilience on this decision table today. And one of the things that I've learned to be able to build resilience through challenging times, through those moments where it's not so easy and they are seasons, is by having the capacity to really exercise the muscle of human intelligence. And I believe there's a real need for us as humans to be able to really use the muscle of human intelligence. And there's so much around that I'm looking forward to bringing some conversations to the decision table with that as a lens. And the muscle of human intelligence for me, and I always go back to me on how I'm looking at it and starting to look at it, because you may think of human intelligence with a different perspective, a different lens. And that's the things that then widens maybe the focus of what I see it as, right? So just a basic way of me seeing what human intelligence is. If you think of the brain, we know with AI, right? We know that AI has data and it drives data so we can make better decisions. If you think of the brain is full of data. It's just human data. And that human data, if you use it wisely, if you know how to access it, can help us to make better decisions and, you know, wire to behaviors that are actually going to bring sustainable solutions to the table. So what if you could do that? What if you could actually wire or rewire, if you need to disrupt the pattern, to better ways in which our brain can function? And part of that is mental toughness. Part of that is really biohacking as well. I think that's an interesting conversation around it. Part of that is being physically healthy and having movement in your world and being, and there's a whole conversation around that. There's so much we can bring into play when we look at human intelligence, because imagine this, and we've talked about this today a lot, around the fact that there's many leaders that aren't making good decisions. There's many systems that aren't right. There's things that need to be adapted, to be flexible, to work and adapt and be effective or more effective as we are dealing with a forever changing world. And part of that is, what if we had smarter humans making smarter decisions and being able to use what is inside of you to actually help and add value to make a difference across the globe? And I think that that's so important and often forgotten, because we are so conditioned to be fitting into a system or a thinking that may have worked, by the way, for a season. But maybe we have to actually, might even just be a little change to that. It might be huge change. It might be just even get rid of that. But the only way we can do that is if, as humans, we can trust ourselves, we can listen to our gut, we are mindful about how we do things, we are able to refuel us as humans so that we have the capacity to give out of. There's so much. And that's what I can't wait for, that series, because I think there's so much to play with and conversations. And if any of these series sound like something you would love to be on a conversation around that, and it's pricked your curiosity, then make sure you reach out to me or to Team. And I'd love to have you on the decision table. If either humanity as stakeholders sounds like a topic you'd love to have a conversation around, or if you'd love a conversation around using the muscle of human intelligence, then make sure you reach out, because these are series that are going to come up on the decision table. We've really focused this last month. We've still got a few days of the month left, so we're not finishing yet, but on using the lens of the need for a new approach. And, there's been amazing conversations on here, and, there's a lot of consistent similarities of what each one of these leaders have said is part of that need for a new approach. So I'm excited to re-listen to these conversations myself and really put the findings into a white paper, which I will share, and make sure that you get to look at it. And if you want to make sure that you're on the list for that white paper, then PM me and give me your email, and we will make sure you get on a list. I haven't got a list, but I'll make sure I have it for you, and make sure that you are top of the list to get the white paper when it comes out, because it's been a great topic here with the need for a new approach to leadership. I don't know what you've got from this, and I would really love feedback and comments, message. Let me know what it is you're getting from the decision table, what you'd love to see on the decision table, some questions, like I said earlier, and so that we can really focus in on, and just to give you some excitement of what we're looking at for the decision table. So we are doing series, as I've said. So, this one has been on the need for a new approach. I think the next one will be the muscle of human intelligence. I'm really looking forward to that. And then we'll do humanity as stakeholders at the decision table as the next series. If you've got some ideas of what you think would be a good series, let us know. This is not me telling us, or it's just things that are very much a part of my world. And I want us to start using those lenses, but I'm very, very happy to bring in other conversations as well. And so one of the things we will do is start having more conversations, something that we do at the Global Human Intelligence Forum, which is we have a lot of people having voices at the table. And so To finish up the series, we will have at the end of this month a conversation with more than just another awesome human. We will have a few extra people on the decision table, and we will have a conversation around that and finish up like that. So I'm looking forward to having those, and we will do that at the end of every series that we do. It is time for a different conversation. It's time for us to create awareness and then to take ownership. So I know there's been amazing things, droplets of wisdom that were spoken about today on the decision table. What is it that you're going to own? What is it that you're going to go, I'm going to really either ponder on that, create curiosity, start asking more questions around that insight, or you've gone, hey, how can I be more resilient? What can that look like? How can I be more resilient to be able to give out of and out from so that I'm a better leader, maybe in whatever your sphere of influence is? There's so much you can take from today. I hope you've enjoyed this decision table just as much as I have. And I hope you enjoyed, having a conversation with a great friend of mine as well. So until tomorrow, may today be filled with many, many amazing moments, and may you think differently, a little different from today's conversation. All right. I'm going to end this broadcast now.